Aoko warned Soichiro, moving as fast as she could without her footfalls causing a din of noise. Soichiro remained near the center of the spiral maze on the second floor.
実を言うと、もう一つ用意しておいた仕掛けがあるの。自分でもやりすぎだって呆れたもんだけど、あなたがここに来るのが遅かったから。ちょっと興に乗っちゃって。
ん？仕掛けって俺用の？
Soichiro tilted his head like a squirrel as Aoko freely discussed the final ace up her sleeve.
地下の柱に着火型のちょっとした魔術式を刻んでおいたの。中心の柱に点火することで連鎖的に他の柱に仕掛けた魔術も起動する。
What the hell? This is overkill!
ジャミングを食らう前に作ったものだから、直接魔力を叩き込めば一気にこういくわ。
Soichiro was a little unsettled by how unclear that last bit was.
青崎、こうじゃわからない。できるだけ明確にどこまで爆破する気だったのか白状してくれ。
Willst du das wirklich wissen?
あと、もしかして俺早まったか？
いや、単なる保険っていうか、追いかけっこの途中であんたを見失ったら、いっそ建物ごと爆破しちゃおうかなって。
Huh. It was her policy to be thorough to the end, after all. She laughed in embarrassment, saying it out loud though.
いくらなんでも徹底しすぎてる。
Faced with Aoko's cruelty, Soichiro forgot about the situation at hand and protested from the bottom of his heart.
何よ、いいじゃない。そのおかげでなんとかなりそうなんだから。
She shot back. Aoko dashed down the corridor, mumbling things that probably would have sent Soichiro packing if he heard them. The strategy was simple. Aoko would use the escape route to the right and avoid the puppet, while making her way down the basement. Upon reaching the central pillar, she would infuse the formula she had prepared with magical energy and escape. Once ignited, it would take about a minute for the chain reaction to spread throughout the whole House of Mirrors, and another minute for the building to collapse. Und wie wollt ihr rauskommen? She would be cutting it a little close, but because she had committed the maze to memory, she was sure she could make it out in time. Aoko assumed that the chain reaction caused by the pillar would clear the barrier that the puppet had placed at the entrance. And even if it was strong enough to withstand the blast, it would not be able to stay standing once the foundation buckled. Soichiro's escape was assured as long as the formula in the basement was activated. Next came the most important part. The automaton was at a disadvantage in the obstacle-laden House of Mirrors and was unable to move at full speed. If it was near the center of the second floor when the building collapsed, it would be caught up and crushed by it. So the problem was keeping the puppet on the second floor until Aoko could make it down to the basement.
当てにしたからね、しずきくん。せめて3分ぐらいは引きつけて。
Ideally, he would be able to keep it busy until she could activate the formula. If that failed to work, him luring it down to the first floor would be the next best thing. She understood perfectly well the danger she was putting Soichiro in, but his luck streak and running speed were nothing to scoff at.
ただ逃げるだけなら、もしかしてとんでもないことをしてくれるかも、あいつ。
Aoko made her way through the hidden passage of the maze, her hopes pinned on Soichiro. Meanwhile, Well out of earshot, Sojiro was readying himself for another desperate chase. He calmed his beating heart using a method of his own making. What mattered most was that he remained calm. The plan was simple enough. And Aoko's orders were succinct and easy to understand.
10メートルぐらいの距離を保って、できるだけゆっくり通路を3、4周すること。横道は鏡のつなぎ目で覚えて。ここなら左回りで6、3、7、2枚目にあるから、そこをぐるぐる回ってれば比較的安全よ。
It was essentially a looping marathon. As long as Soshiro maintained a distance of the puppet's extended arm, and just enough that she could continue to track him, she should continue chasing him indefinitely. Simple though the task was, Soshiro was putting his life on the line as bait. And then there was the final order to run as fast as he could to the exit when the building began to sway.
結構じゃなくてかなりきついんじゃないかなこれは。
Oh, da kommt die Musik. He nervously stuck his head out from around the corner. He could hear the sound of the music box from the other side of the corridor. First, he had to make eye contact with it, then head through the shortcut on the right and begin the game of tag. He spotted it and braced himself. Closer, closer. Fearing that her arm could fly at him at any moment, he went over Aoko's instruction in his head.
あれ
However, he could not quite remember which pain led to the first hidden passage. The third? The sixth? The ninth? Du bist tot. No. He was sure that was mistaken. He was confident he had it memorized moments ago, but his nerves had gotten the best of him, and his head was now spinning. Then, Soichiro realized that the sound of his pursuer was beginning to growing distant, and at an incredible speed.
何
Ren? The unusual silhouette of the puppet astonished him. Before it had taken the form of a beautiful girl, but now it made a bizarre transformation and returned to the first floor to pursue her primary target.
あ、いやそれは
Soichiro was no longer sure what to do. With not even the time to mourn his failure, the puppet had vanished out of sight. I'll be of help, just let me go. Or so he had said, but now he could not follow through.
さて自分はこれからどうしよ
Alone, he tilted his head in frustration. He spoke into the darkness as if Aoko would be there to answer him. That very moment, having arrived on the first floor, Aoko quickly understood what had transpired above her. She did not even have to strain her ears to hear the puppet. Even during its heyday, this attraction had never made sounds like the one she heard coming towards her now. It was the sound of despair, as if a horde of monstrous hedgehogs were scraping their way past the mirror in her direction.
ドジ3分どころか10秒持たないってどういうことよ。
Rather than buying her time, Soichiro had in fact stolen hers. She dreamed of cursing him for failing to fulfill his one job.
複数の足音ってことは2足から多脚に切り替えたのね。
The echoes made it sound like the footsteps of dozens of feet. To Aoko, it sounded like a giant six-legged spider tearing its way down the corridor. It was little wonder that it was so much faster than before. Its perception of its surroundings, though echolating, was of particular use in the darkness. Compared to sight-dependent humans, this automaton was far better equipped to navigate its way through the labyrinth of mirrors. If it could not keep pace earlier, it was because its bipedal form of movement was not up to the task. But the stability provided by multiple legs gave it speed that far exceeded that of any human.
どうするどうするどうする
Her thoughts spun out as she tried to come up with a plan B. All she knew for sure was that this was a pivotal moment. If she continued standing still, she had seconds left at most. Even in her current state, she knew she could easily neutralize the bounded field blocking the entrance without casting a spell. All she had to do was pour a little of her own energy into it. Aoko could sprint with all her might for a little more than 3 minutes. The puppet had far more stamina than she did. She could only come up with 3 options. The first was to escape through the exit in front of her. The second was to hide herself from somewhere within the far more complicated first floor. And the third was to run into the basement and be stuck like a rat in a trap.
なんだ考えるまでもない
She made her decision with zero hesitation. Moving her stiff legs again with determined strength, the oncoming storm was almost upon her. Her resolve firm, she turned and ran, descending into the darkness. No matter what, a finale should be glorious. This would be the Mirror Castle's final scene. 2 humans and a puppet. A young sorceress ran towards the subterranean heart of the castle, while an autonomous antique chased its prey into the depths of a demonic dungeon. A minute later, a faint blue charge would ripple through the castle. This was the main pillar in the deepest depths of the basement. The pillar itself was not there to support the castle structure, but it would serve nicely as the symbol into which the girl thrust her fist with all her magical energy. This was the blow that would bring down the castle. She imagined the scene as she threw the punch, a scene that would soon become reality. It was simple ignition magecraft, meant to release the condensed magical energy engraved into the 4 pillars that formed the foundation of the structure. Using electricity as a switch meant virtually instantaneous activation. Oh boy. Swift and elegant. A hammer of destruction descended upon the castle of dreams that had stubbornly resisted its fate for 2 years. It was almost a joyous sound, and so the lifeless and abandoned castle of mirrors set the stage for its final and most spectacular performance. Aoko's magical energy became an electrical charge that activated the magecraft formula engraved into the pillar. The chain reaction would lead to the castle's destruction.
ご苦労様でも思ってたよりくたびれてたのねこれじゃあ1分持つかどうか
The plaza in the center of the basement. Aoko tried to steady her breathing while rotating her magic crest at full speed. She wreathed her arms in blue light, fully aware that she could no longer activate another formula. Huh. Her labored breathing refused to settle. She stood at the center of the basement. Without being spotted even once, she had managed to make it all the way to the central pillar. It was a 100-meter dash in 13 seconds flat. Undoubtedly a new personal best. She spurred on her weakened heart, knowing full well the fate that awaited her.
入れば追ってくる。地下に行けば逃げられない。当然よね。最後まで逃げ回ろうなんて虫のいい話だった。
Hindsight was 2020. The castle was only a minute away from collapsing completely. If they stayed here, they would both be crushed by the rubble. The puppet certainly did not care. With no life of its own, its sole concern was the elimination of its target, Aoko Aozaki. Indeed, the enemy had been willing to die from the start. She resented her own lack of resolve. It wasn't like her to tuck tail and run from an opponent that didn't fear death.
Vivoin sum, solitare putoresque inferis. Ictius meus obitus dies, et meus nativus dies, Theobeam.
In slumber I live, in dirt I rot. Today is the day I died and was born. Now I come to you.
そもそも自爆覚悟じゃないあれ。六足歩行とフィンの一撃は使いすぎよ。もう呪詛による魔力補給じゃ間に合わない。
Such a perpetual motion device was only as good as its ability to regulate its energy consumption. Using so many functions at once meant it was burning through fuel quickly and losing the ability to process the curse that powered it. It was using up all of the functions it had been given to achieve its aim. This was the pride of a tool, if such thing could have ego. Those endowed with sentience could never hope to understand. A beast born to do nothing but run would burn any human who faced its resolve.
ほんと、もったいない。こういう無茶をするのは姉貴だけかと思ってたけど、いるところにはいるもんね。
But Aoko did not intend a sacrifice play here. She respected her adversary now, and she was done regretting her choices. There was no time to waste.
行くわよ。ここできっかり。
Aoko had every intention of paying it back double for what it had done to her. The energy Aoko had accumulated exploded out of her right leg. She aimed for a single thing, a head-on attack. The enemy's response was a curse to crush her heart. A curse that would rend Aoko's heart and destroy itself in the process. As soon as she saw it, Aoko kicked the floor as hard as she could. Her long hair swirled through the air and she flipped aside. This lateral move almost sent her tumbling to the ground, but a quick swing of her arm allowed her to regain her balance. A shot grazed her arm, with the curse scorching her left shoulder. She did not flinch. Aoko knew she could hold on as long as she continued to avoid a direct fin shot.
スナップ。
Off balance and in pain, it took her half a second to recover. The moment she raised her head, she deflected the attack with a fist full of magical energy.
せーの。
If the puppet had a will of its own, its eyes would have popped right out of its socket. It would have been floored, shocked at the strong will that allowed this girl to perform a series of moves like this.
クラック。
Nummer 2. Aoko's response was instantaneous. While her power was not sufficient to completely redirect the arm's trajectory, it was just enough to deflect it harmlessly past her hair.
Initi eraberamos ton bibinus de loressunt. Nemo adiuvat, nemo adiuvat, nemo adiuvat.
It was all a mistake. I should have never been born. A ton for me, a ton for me, a ton for me. The chant became a curse that dropped Aoko of her vitality. Did it still have something left in the tank, or was it actually indignant? Whatever the reason, Aoko was easily able to resist its weakened defensive maneuver. Kick! Nice! And her right leg, pulsing with magical energy, shot up into the puppet's chest from below. It was much lighter than Aoko anticipated. Or rather, she felt little resistance. An automaton's rate that was determined by its internals, the size of its power source. Ironically, it was the superiority of its music box engine that would prove to be its downfall.
Venite, venite, venite. Meum sepulchrum, venite.
Welcome, welcome, welcome my grave. A stuttering curse. Having taken the full brunt of Aoko's kick, the puppet bounced from the ceiling to floor, collapsing in a heap. Its internal construction had been warped by the impact, leaving the drum of the music box that powered the puppet warped as well.
恨むなら設計者を恨みなさい。
Du solltest rennen.
ダイナモの一つでも積んでいれば、もうちょっとは重たくなったでしょうに。
Yeah. Part of the ceiling came crashing down in front of Aoko, snapping her back to her senses.
ところで今、どうやってぶっ倒したんだろう。
Wieso hast du das Gebäude überhaupt zerstört? She was so stunned by her own victory that she forgot the House of Mirrors had already begun to collapse.
こっちのがやばかった。
Oh god, it's a timer. There was no time to relish in her victory or pity her opponent. Not unless she wanted to meet the same fate. As the situation stood, she found it hard to imagine getting out alive.
急げ、ダッシュだ私。
She slapped herself on the cheek and took off. This was her bounty for finishing their battle in a matter of seconds. With her breathing labored by all the excitement, she ran for the exit. The collapse was intensifying by the second. Having lost its support pillar, the castle was buckling under its own weight.
この邪魔。
Escaping from the basement was proving to be no easy task. While she was taking the shortest route possible through the maze, she was nearly crushed by a falling piece of the ceiling along the way. This was the second time, no third, she had to deal with the fallen rubble along the way. She destroyed the debris on the stairs with magic bullets as she ran. Sie kann wieder schießen. The automaton's jamming had long since worn off. The early attack had damaged the vast majority of its functions. Her breathing was heavy as she ran. The intensity surrounding her sparked her brain into the overdrive. The ceiling seemed to be collapsing in slow motion. For her, a second felt like 5. Her frayed nails made it hard to read time correctly. as her life seemed to flash before her very eyes, a light at the end of the tunnel. Oh Gott, das Ding lebt noch. There was debris riddled throughout the stairway, forcing her to crawl it up. She emerged from the destroyed basement into the collapsing first floor. That the plaza was still traversable at all was a miracle in itself. Unfortunately for her, the crucial path to the exit was still intact.
よし、ついてる。
The corridor to the entrance was still intact. The basement maze only extended as far as the plaza, so the entrance corridor wouldn't collapse. Only the ceiling would cave in, leaving the scaffolding surrounding it intact. She got herself this far by telling herself repeatedly that fate would decide whether or not she reached the plaza. Her gamble paid off. It was her lucky day. All she had to do was muster the last of her strength and keep moving forward until... She hesitated for a fraction of a second. Was it naivety? A sense of responsibility? She pushed aside the image that popped into her head and continued running down the corridor.
言っとくけど、時間合わせの余裕はないわよ。そんな上等な作戦じゃないし、お互いできることをやったら最速で出口に向かいましょう。
That was 5 minutes ago. At the time, Sojiro had nodded with trepidation, and Aoko had not bothered to ask herself why.
何様だったの私。今は走ることだけ考えろ。
This corridor was giving out too. If she were to look back, she was sure she would see the building collapsing in on her. She was also sure she had no time to waste doing so. Her luck was fading as fast as the building's structural integrity. It was a small miracle that she had escaped serious injury up to this point, and she could not afford even the slightest slip-up. An ankle sprain, loss of balance, even a sneeze would be fatal. A simple pat on the back was enough to end it. So naturally... Ugh! That was clear as day. From the detritus of the stairway, death had arisen to take her down with it. A corpse that had crawled its way up from the depths of the hell itself. It was still operational. And it was still armed with curses. It had crawled after her, watching as Aoko desperately tried to save herself. The puppet's arm shot forward. While Aoko did not turn to meet it, she could see its reflection in the mirrors.
E salvato, e salvato, e salvato, e salvato.
Jesus. Extend, extend, extend. This time she could not dodge it. There was absolutely nothing she could do. The puppet with her face sang,
Venit Domine,
I invite you
Lut sine somne,
to die a muddy
et
death.
pulvere simile codean,
Become a whispering dust.
cor prede,
Gouge out your heart.
te judico.
Death be upon you. For a moment, she could not believe her eyes. This was the last thing she expected to see.
しつこいぞお前。
A fierce expression adorned the face of the boy who had been waiting in the plaza as he smashed the puppet's outstretched arm. Anger really did not suit him at all. His weapon of choice was a fire extinguisher. He must have searched the maze for something to use as a weapon. No, never mind that. It was too crazy to contemplate, but had he stayed behind for her? Aoko stopped the feat she had sworn to herself she would never stop moving and extended a hand out to him.
そんなのほっといていいから早く。
Sojiro tossed the fire extinguisher aside and took off running. Pieces of ceiling continued to collapse like dominoes. They kept moving with dust and dirt following their wake. Their shadows raced through the collapsing corridor with all their strength. The castle was in the throes of death. With a massive crash and a cloud of dust, the final chapter of the fairy tale that had been Kidsey Land came to an abrupt end. Oh boy. This duel to the death was over. For a moment, amidst the swirling emotion, all past enmity was left behind, and the two collapsed on the lawn and basked in the strange solidarity. The ringing in the ears subsided before long. A tremor of such magnitude seemed impossible in an amusement park like this. As the sounds of destruction echoed across the park, Aoko addressed the individual at her side.
ねえ、生きてる？
うん。
チェ。
While the click of her tongue was adorable, the meaning behind it was anything but.
青崎、あいつどうなった？
見ての通りよ。今頃バラバラ死体になってるんじゃない？
Sojiro sighed, not wholly relieved by her frank response. His reason.
でも、そんな心配より自分の心配をした方がいいと思うわよ、しずきくん。
He wasn't out of the woods yet, after all.
青崎、子供の頃はいじめっ子だっただろ。
Höchstwahrscheinlich.
可逆趣味はないって自負してるけど。それで、今の自分の立場、分かってる？
Oh Gott, dieses Lächeln. She sat up and smiled. Sojiro hung his head in shame, wondering why her kind tone and expression were so chilling.
面目次第もございません。
かしこまってもダメよ。あの提案には大前提があったわよね。これは取引だって。あなたが役に立つのなら見逃してあげるっていう。
わかってる。だから面目ないって言ってるだろ。
Sojiro made a show of avoiding her eyes, like a pouting child. Aoko was taken aback by this sulky display. Perhaps he was angry at himself rather than her. He was not mad because she would not let him go. He was mad that he had not done his part. Aoko sighed for what seemed like the millionth time that day. She could not figure out what surprised her more, his unconditional kindness or her naive approval of it.
じゃあ、覚悟はできてるの？
そんなのはできないけど、約束だからな。結局は何もしていないし。
It was certainly the case that he failed to do any of the things she had expected of him. But just then, she glanced back at the collapsed house of mirrors. What had he done after failing so spectacularly? He had searched for the extinguisher so he could use it as a weapon, and waited patiently in the plaza as the maze collapsed all around him, because he thought it was wrong of him to leave alone. It was a foolish choice, and the exact opposite of her choice to run towards the exit without hesitation.
ま、それでよしとするか。
She was satisfied, even as she was shocked at how naive she was being. It was true that he had saved her. She smiled inwardly, admiring, if only for a moment, the bravery he continued to show in the face of such extreme circumstances.
役割は果たさなかったけど、アフターケアは合格だし、約束は守らなくちゃね。
With a nod, she pulled herself to her feet.
約束は、いつか守ってもらうとして。
The girl tried to keep a straight face as she offered a hand to the boy still lying on the ground.
結果はどうあれ手助けしてもらったし、特別サービスってことで、今夜はもう手を出さないであげる。
Das heißt, morgen machen wir das nochmal?
Huh?
She bashfully averted her gaze. Though her profile appeared different than it had in the past, it was clearly still the face of the vibrant girl he met the day he first arrived in town.
何？
As if she had felt his eyes on her, she shot him a frowning glare.
いや、突拍子もないけど、青崎は律儀だなって。
He took her outstretched hand. Feeling his weight as she pulled him up, she could not help but think that he was about the last person she wanted to hear that from.
ところで、今夜はって言うけど、明日からは？
Morgen ist wieder fair game.
さ、その時になったら考えるわ。
She shrugged her shoulders as if she was not sure herself. The response was so unlike her that it made Sochiro smile. Was it the solidarity of having escaped death together, or their fleeting camaraderie that made him do so? It might have been for this night only, but the air between them was kind and gentle. A lot had transpired, but the midwinter nightmare had come to an end. The pair had overcome many trials and tribulations, and could now leave the mirror realm in their wake. But before that...
随分と身勝手ね。それはあなた一人で決めていいことだったかしら、青子。
Uh-oh. Hi Alice, danke für die Hilfe in dem Kampf. It was the voice of a beautiful singing bird and a merciless machine, all rolled into one.
アリス。
Her voice quivered as she spoke the name. The lady in black made her presence known. The night was not yet over. Her name was Alice Kuonji. She was a witch whose name struck fear into the heart of Aoko, an avatar of the night who would allow no witnesses. Das klingt nicht gut. Boah, so ein dickes Buch. Ja, was hat Alice vor? Night of Witches 2. The melody stirred an emotion like nostalgia within them. Something once familiar but now lost to this world. They believed beyond a shadow of a doubt that it would play for all eternity. From opening stanza to final coda. It was a mysterious siren's song, merry yet longing, that heralded a return from dreams to reality. The night shook. A song was spun. Now the lost paradise was unearthed. Abandoned dreams, forsaken idols, they all responded to the cry of the blue cat. The name of that bell was Diddle Diddle, Banquet of the Night. All fables made possible, all marvels made real by the magecraft of Alice Kuonji, more magical than magic itself.
随分と身勝手ね。それはあなた一人で決めていいことだったかしら、青子。
Alice sat, Alice sat perched atop the clock tower like a black bird of ill omen. She smoothed the ruffles of her skirt as if she were preening.
アリス、
There was tension in Aoko's voice as she lifted her head. The calm atmosphere from a moment prior had long since been shooed away by Alice's gaze.
あの子確か
Sochiro searched his hazy memory. He could not clearly make out her face at this distance, but he was sure he had seen her around town a number of times. Where and when eluded him, however, as the tension in the air kept him from connecting all the dots.
驚いた。随分と仲間思いになったのね、アリス。今夜は私に任せるんじゃなかったっけ？
Aoko readied her guard and took half a step forward. Unconsciously, from an objective standpoint, it almost looked as though she were protecting the figure beside her. As Alice's silence grew even heavier, her eyes, fixed on the ground below her, were devoid of the emotion. An indescribable sense of dread and pressure laid claim over the plaza.
金
If he strained his ears, he could make out the faint ringing of a bell echoing in the distance. The rippling sound waves seemed unbelievably to be emanating from under the ground.
なあ青崎あの子
黙ってて。
Sochiro stepped back, trying to stay out of the way. It was as though he had been told to go to hell for the crime of asking if the girl was Aoko's friend.
そうね。仲間思いに当てはまるかは微妙だけど、良くない予感がしたから様子を見に来ただけ。別にあなたの仕事を疑ったわけじゃないわ。
それはどうも。どうせならもう少し早くその良くない予感とやらに気づいてほしかったけど。でもま、ご覧の通り自己解決したわ。夜も遅いし、さっさと帰っていいわよ、アリス。私の仕事っぷりを疑うわけじゃないんでしょ？
Their eyes locked on one another. Alice's stare was uncomfortably cold. Aoko's was bold, daring Alice to air her complaints.
いえ、気が変わったわ。せっかくだし二人で帰りましょう。その方があなたらしいわ。帰りしな、人形の話でも聞かせてちょうだい。
はっ、らしいって何よ、らしいって。いいから帰れ帰れ、ぐうたらアリス。部屋に閉じこもって役に立たないムクドリでも作ってろっての。
A disappointed sigh escaped Alice's delicate lips. It seemed that the black-clad girl was more astonished than angry.
青子、口にしたくないけど、本気？
Quietly, Alice questioned her roommate of nearly 2 years.
呆れた。二人で秘密を守ると言ったのに。まだ半端にそっち側なの？それとも情でも移った？
別に情っていうより私の気分よ。だいたい方針なんてその場その場で変わるもんでしょ。気分ならなおさらよ。そっちこそ一度した約束は絶対守るなんて時代遅れなんじゃない？
The proverbial knife were out now. No quarter was given, no quarter taken. Sadly, their partnership was one of convenience and had not reached the level of mutual understanding. Their version of friendship was both delicate and unique. When a conflict of opinion arose, each would refuse to budge until the other crumbled. Neither was concerned of the other's plight, and at least for now, that was how they liked it.
そうね。今の暴言はあなたらしいとは思うけど。
Once again, she let out a sigh, even larger than the one before.
言い争いは後にしましょう。そこの彼をいなかったことにするのは私だけで十分だし。
Finally, she struck straight to the point, as if making to move a chess piece. Alice lifted her slender finger. A gobble? Ooh. Even this simple action seemed mysterious to Sojiro, the same boy who had been hunted by his classmate Aoko Aozaki and borne witness to her automaton. Aoko's violence and an animated doll. Though perhaps far beyond the realm of logic, both these things were derived from reality. As surprised as he had been, there was no need to think of them as total mysteries. However, when the thing appeared out of thin air from a seemingly unrelated gesture, he had no word for it besides mysterious. Sojiro stood motionless, captivated by this stage performer's magic trick, as the girl's single-finger magecraft turned into an attack directed at him. A blue light flew from the side to repel it, annihilating it without a trace.
やば。
Huh. Aoko immediately regretted her reflexive shot.
どういうこと？約束を曲げただけじゃなく、ルールまで破るつもり？
The already chilled midwinter air plunged below freezing. Alice looked calm and collected on the outside, but in reality she was sometimes even more hot-blooded than Aoko. Especially when it concerned her familiars. Accidentally destroying one often would result in a week of silent treatment. But maliciously destroying one, Alice would reserve the right to retaliate without fair warning.
あっちゃー。いつかやるとは思ったけど、ついに逆鱗に触れちゃったか。
Though Aoko was shocked at the depth of her own stupidity, she also was in fact a little bit relieved. She did not intend to make any excuses, and she had no regrets. If she had broken the rules, then so had Alice.
青子。
なんていうか。
If anything, this took a load off her mind. After all, now there was no going back. Aoko never intended to break her own rules. If there was anything for Aoko to regret, it was putting too little power into her shot.
私的に今夜こいつに死なれるのは困るのよ。なんで日を改めて殺しに来てくれないアリス。いいでしょ？たった一日ぐらい。
Oh shit. Taking on a pro bono case in the defense of suspect S was the socially acceptable thing.
それは市場？
悪い？一宿一般の恩義って割と大事にしてるの、私。
私との協定より。
ええ、時と場合によっては。
Sochiro's human rights had not yet entered the argument. The girls were busy pouring oil on each other's flame. The girl clad in black was the first to move, or rather to erupt.
そう。よくわかったわ、青子。 私は彼をここで殺す。あなたは彼をここだけ生かす。つまり私と戦うということでいい？
そんなのいいわけないじゃない。
Aoko bit back the retort. She was very familiar with Alice's magecraft, and knew painfully well how many mystiques were hidden in Alice's tiny body. The odds of victory were essentially non-existent, and once the first shot had been fired, Alice Kuonji was without mercy. Whether facing a roommate or a friend, a most beloved family member or a stranger. Once Alice began to fight as a witch, she became a heartless, unflappable monster. Aoko advanced another half step forward, as if to encourage herself. It was too late to back down now. The situation was no longer a trivial quarrel over a witness. The bedrock of their so-called friendship had nothing to do with their individual abilities, but everything to do with being equals in will. That is why, in order to stay true to herself, Aoko had no room for compromise or deception.
もちろんあんたを殺すことになってもそこのバカは生かしきるわ。それに
Her magic circuits howled as they kicked into gear. Her body, which had mostly been dormant during the battle with the puppet, ignited, preparing to demonstrate its true worth.
それにどのみち最後には殺し合う仲でしょ私たち。
Her courage overpowered any fear she had for her opponent. Turning her body, her magic circuits, to become like the barrel of a gun, Aoko fired a magic bullet. It was an exceedingly basic magecraft formula. There was no nature interference, no creating of wind, parting of water, or hastening of decay. It was simply the process of converting the imaginary action known as magical energy into something real before releasing it as heat. Thus, Aoko's destructive power was equal to her supply of magical energy. The magic bullets she had used against Sochiro were among the most basic single-action magecraft that did not require an incantation. At her present ability, Aoko's main mode of attack, her magic bullets, could be fired at 3 levels of power. These were at the 2nd level. This required a double-action magecraft, a casting through the activation of her crest combined with a simplified incantation. However, without blinking, Alice dispersed the shot that Aoko had mustered all of her spirit to fire. Aoko tutted in frustration. A swift sneak attack magecraft that used a simplified incantation would not be enough to break Alice's guard.
相変わらずお堅いこと。そのから一段と独りよがりになってるんじゃない？
Aoko provoked Alice in order to disguise her own lack of composure. Somehow Alice seemed delighted by Aoko's bravado.
売り言葉に買い言葉というやつね。こういう勢いだけのきっかけは初めてだけど驚いたわ。こんなくだらない理由でもその気になるものなのね、人間って。
Alice giggled, smiling with heartfelt amazement. Alice gestured her left hand towards the earth. Zap, 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 zap. Countless utensils shot out from underneath the cobblestones paving the plaza.
しずきくん、後ろに飛んで。
She grabbed his hand as she shouted, jumping backwards before he even had the chance to respond. As if they had wills of their own, the utensils that had suddenly appeared from the ground gave chase. As the barrier of spears grew around them, Aoko and Sojiro put some distance between themselves and the clock tower.
これで終わり？
Just under 30 feet stood between them and Alice. The lethal weapons that had crumbled the stone beneath them fell short of what Aoko had anticipated. They now encircled the clock tower, making the scene look like the burning of a witch at the stake.
普通逆じゃない？ここは私たちを逃がさないよう槍で周りを囲むものでしょ。
The path behind them was safe. If they wanted, they could try to make a break for the main gate and escape.
いいのアリス。悪いけど逃げられるなら逃げるわよ。私。
If she could just make it back to town, it would be Aoko's win. All she wanted to do was let Sojiro get away for the night, so if she could get him back to the city, it would be, for the most part, mission accomplished.
Huh?
Or so she had thought. Without even offering a glance at her targets below, Alice carefully and lovingly pulled out a bottle from her pocket.
緑のフラスコ？あれって確か。やば！とにかくファイヤー！
Her shot was deflected with ease. Gone was Aoko's earlier bravado. It was only natural. Aoko had indeed grown as a mage. Over the last 2 years of study, her studies had progressed well, and she'd more or less gotten a grasp on her roommate's tendencies and abilities. This had made her conceited enough to believe that under favorable circumstances, she'd be able to show Alice a thing or two in a fight. Alice uncorked the magical bottle. A gentle breeze caressed her cheek. Diddle diddle fled as a new player stepped onto the stage. But from where would it enter? The sound of footsteps and nostalgic parade approached. Holy shit. Unfortunately, it was true. This was a miracle that Aoko Aozaki, an apprentice mage, had never witnessed. The dead came to life. The animate awakened. The woods were
いいわ。ごっこ遊びをしましょう、青子。